So indeed, I'm Peter. I'm here to talk a little bit about some problems and some challenges that we're seeing in the industry today, and how a universal video player can actually solve it. Most of you will probably know this kind of statistics. If we look at pure statistics on how people are consuming media these days, we're seeing that linear TV, it's going down, but other devices like PCs, smartphones, tablets, they're going up massively, even more than the actual drop for linear TV. So in general, video is on the rise, which is very good. But viewers are consuming it across a very big range of different devices. And everybody just expects not to be able to just see it whenever they want through VOD or recap or rewind of live shows. But they want to use their own devices, and everybody has a mixture of devices these days. They want to use all of those devices to view their content. And a lot of companies out there are already very successful in handling those challenges and making sure that their content is available everywhere. But there are some different approaches that are being taken. One of the most common approaches that is there, and it usually grew historically, is by just using specific video players for every device or every platform that you want to reach. For example, you have an HTML5-based video player that you use to reach browsers. You have AV player for tablets such as iPads, but also, of course, iPhones. So anything in that ecosystem. People are using DT201a to target Google devices, Android devices, such as smartphones, and then anything else that comes out natively out of the box for other connected devices like Chromecast, but also Rokus or set-top boxes and smart TVs. And usually it grew historically like this. Companies started out with one player to target a specific device, and then it grew because they were adding on more and more platforms as they became available. So that's definitely one of the interesting strategies that we see. But another strategy that we see, which is a little bit more flexible, is actually using a single player across all of the different devices. That means, of course, that the player that you pick does need to support all of those devices, which isn't very straightforward. But it actually has a number of very big advantages. We see three very big considerations to switch strategies between the video player approach. One of those considerations is actually consistency in viewer experience, because that's something that actually becomes very difficult when you have a lot of different players at play. Another one is cost, not just licensing cost, but also maintenance cost, support cost, integration costs. So I'll go into a little bit more detail there. And the last consideration is actually how your player is integrating with the rest of your streaming infrastructure. So to kick things off, you have to keep in mind that a video player is the most consumer-facing part of your video pipeline. If that's not working very well, then your viewers will probably have a very, very poor experience. So it's really a key component to deliver a good viewer experience. And the difficulty is that you have to deliver it across all of those different devices. Because whatever device a viewer has, they just expect that everything works there. And not just that all features are available, but also that all of those features which are available, that they work in a similar way. Think, for example, on how ABR works across different platforms, or think about how offline downloads work. You have some of those on some platforms, but not on others. For example, if you look at the per device approach that people are taking, all of these players, AV player, XO player, those are two very good examples here. They're built by different companies which have different priorities, different strategies, and they're implementing them according to their way of thinking. But if you're a viewer and you want to access a certain capability, for example, you have a mobile device, you want to do offline downloads there, you can do that pretty well, for example, with DT201a. They added it a while ago. But how are you going to do that, for example, on a mobile device? I mean, you can pick up your laptop, not on a mobile device, on a laptop. You can pick up your laptop, get on a plane, but you can't watch your video there, for example, because your HTML5 player doesn't support offline downloads. That's very frustrating as a viewer. Another thing, for example, with ABR, some players implement it in a way to ensure that the video will never stall, which is absolutely critical. But they do it, for example, by always picking a very low bandwidth. That just gives very poor video quality. While others, they will try to get higher video quality, which has an impact on startup time, for example. All of those differences, it really matters. And it really delivers different user experiences. So getting it all consistent, that's actually a very difficult thing to do in this approach. However, if you have a universal video player approach, all the features, they're all aligned because every platform, it's using the same player. It's similar implementations, same feature sets, and the way that it works on one device, as a viewer, you know perfectly well how it will behave on a different device as well. And everything is just very consistent, which gives you huge advantages. The next important consideration that I already mentioned is actually cost. Because from a cost perspective, these differences also have a major impact. For example, think about how you have to investigate which features are available when you're picking out a new player for a certain platform. You have to train your team to learn how to work with those APIs. You have to train your team to learn how the flows go, how the architecture of the player is actually built up. Then they have to integrate it. They have to do all kinds of QA on all the different platforms, make sure that it's compatible with the infrastructure. For example, if some players support subtitle format A, while other players on other platforms don't support it, you will need to adapt your infrastructure based on that. And of course, for all the players that you pick, you have to do support and maintenance. So if we look at what that means more or less for a per device type of player approach, you're actually doing a lot of these costs for every different player that you have, which just sums up to a massive multiplier of the amount of devices that you want to support. So if you really want to support a big number of devices, this could actually get quite costly because your team is always repeating the same tasks across all the different players and all the different platforms. However, if you're using a universal player approach, some of these costs can actually be reduced. For example, investigation on features which are available across the platforms. That's one that just drops very easily because the player is everywhere the same. The same thing with education. That player will work with similar APIs across the board. So it's very easy to learn what the methodologies are that that player is using and just port them towards all the different platforms. Of course, integration cost and QA cost, you will have that for any platform and any device anyway, because you want some assurance that it actually works everywhere. And because of the different languages across the different platforms, you will still have some integration cost for every platform. But as well, changes to infrastructure, they will be universal as well, because those subtitles that are supported on platform A, they will also be supported on platform B. And the same actually goes for support. If there are support questions, it's always the same players, so you know, regardless of the platform, where you have to go to, and there's only one vendor that you have to point to and pass on the information. So that actually gives you a rather significant benefit if you look at it from a cost perspective. Then, as I already mentioned, the video player, it's actually the most consumer-facing aspect and a key interface to delivering your user experience. So it's also a component that actually reaches out and touches a lot of the other integration points that you have around you. It's decoding the content that comes from your encoder server. It's being packaged through your preferred packager, going onto your CDN, pulling it from there, potentially encrypted with your DRM from your partner. It's playing out the data and pushing back analytics through whatever system that you have. So it's actually touching a lot of different aspects of your infrastructure. So you have to make sure that it's actually compatible. But how do you do that if you're running across multiple players? And actually, the way that we see how people approach it is by writing glue code. So you're basically writing tiny pieces of integration code for every different player that you're using. You have some glue code for THEOplayer, you have some for AVPlayer, for your HTML5 player, and for all the others that you're using as well. But of course, the problem with that is that that glue code, it has a tendency to require updates, or it could contain bugs. For example, your analytics system, they could publish a new SDK, which requires you to modify your glue code, or AVPlayer or THEOplayer or another player vendor that you're using, they could be pushing out a new version as well. And of course, if either of those parties has a new version, you will need to be changing that glue code. It gives you a higher risk of bugs as well. And of course, if there is a bug, you don't even know if it's in the glue code, if it's in the player, or if it's in the other SDK. So you will need to figure that out, see where the problem is, and then go from there. In an ideal situation, you will actually not have any glue code, or you would try to reduce it to a minimum. And actually, what a common thing is with a universal video player approach is that that glue code, it actually becomes part of integration code within the video player. So video player vendors, they usually take up well, the responsibility to integrate with those analytics platforms or advertising platforms or DRM solutions that you're using, and guarantee that if an update is being made on the analytics system or on the player side, everything is going through QA, everything is being tested, and you don't have to worry about it. So it actually gives you a very big advantage to support and to maintain those integrations. The risk of things breaking, it's a lot smaller compared to having to maintain a lot of glue code in your code base. In the end, however, it's up to you to decide. As I mentioned, we've seen the per-device type of approach. We've seen it a lot, especially with customers where it just grew historically. For example, I've seen customers who had 10 or even 15 or even more different platforms that they were supporting. Oh, that one too fast. But yeah, we had a lot of different platforms that they were supporting. And you really see that it becomes quite unmaintainable after a certain while. And you might think that 15 is a big number, but it really isn't once you start supporting casting devices, smart TVs, set-top boxes. The sheer amount of different platforms that you have there is, well, let's say, rather large. And in the end, it's those three advantages that I already mentioned that are really a core driver for most of the customers that we see to change their strategy towards universal video players. And of course, you guys can guess it. I'm from THEOplayer. And I should probably have updated this slide because we actually won the Reader's Choice Award today here as well. But we're a player company. We really believe in the universal video player approach. We also believe very much in performance and, of course, the viewer experience, which is a part of the universal video player approach, as well as the technical complexity that this approach is removing. So in short, for us, actually, what we see is that a very good approach, which is very sensitive for, well, very sensible for a lot of our customers, is actually to use a single video player across all of the devices because of the advantages that I just mentioned with viewer experience, reduction of complexity with the infrastructure, but also just from a sheer cost standpoint. And if you don't believe me, feel free to go and ask some of our customers. We have quite a long list of them. And as far as I know, they're all very happy. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know after the talk or just come over to our booth. We have a booth with ocean view in the left far corner of the conference room, of the hall, basically. So if you have any other questions or anything else, feel free to let me know, and I'm here in case that you have any.
Right, let's have a round of applause for Peter. And let's have some excellent questions for him now. We have a few minutes. Who's got a question about THEOplayer's universal video player? Anybody? Still waking up, guys?
Yep, we have one here at the front.
We have one. Where did I miss? Where's the hand?
At the front.
Oh, okay. Good. Make it a good one.
Thanks. How do you deal with customers that maybe prefer native apps because of perceived quality benefits or whatever?
That's not a problem for us. While we originally grew as an HTML5 based company, we actually have native apps available as well. You can use it on a mobile device, of course, in your browser through our HTML5 player, but we have Java SDKs, we have iOS SDKs. So we actually have more SDKs these days than our actual HTML5 based player is part of our product. We don't just go, for example, to the mobile platforms. We also go, for example, to casting devices like Chromecast, Android TV, Apple TV, set-top boxes, smart TVs. We've expanded quite a lot. So that's a need that we can fully satisfy as well.
Okay, good. Got another one.
Hi, my name is Hugo, and kind of following what he said, if a client comes and says, like, I want to support all these multiple devices, what would you recommend more? Like, would you, of the approach of having like the HTML5 player across all the devices and so on, or actually like having like native videos built from from the SDKs?
It will depend on the use case, actually. What we see is that HTML5, while it's a very good basis, because of course it allows you to be present on a lot of different platforms with one easy swoop, it's a core platform, definitely, because you want to have some presence in the web browser as well, because it's one of the big hubs for consumption. Usually, we actually see, and we recommend quite often as well, to build native apps, depending on the use case. If you really want to give that premium experience, then building apps, it just makes a lot of sense. If it's less of an interest to you, then you can probably do with, well, a decently built mobile web app as well. You have some pretty good ways to go with, for example, accelerated media pages, or the more lightweight HTML5-based apps. It's usually, yeah, it depends on the use case, both from a cost perspective and, of course, from an image perspective and a brand perspective. Some brands prefer the native apps. Other brands don't want to spend the money on them and just go HTML5. It's usually, yeah, usually a cost, a question of cost.
Okay, do we have one more? Anyone? Good. Give me your name and question.
Hi, my name is Jason. Just a quick question on the universal approach. How is your experience with smart TV sets, ranging back to like 2011?
Smart TV sets are definitely always the most interesting questions, especially because you don't just have a difference between different brands. For example, Tizen for Samsung, and then WebOS, for example, for LG, or Android TV for some other devices. The problem is that even there, between the different versions of the TVs, depending on when you bought it, it's a completely different version. And in a lot of cases, if you use a per-device type of approach, you will need different players and be even integrating different players for the same brand of TVs. From our perspective, of course, that's what our engineering team deals with. We actually middle it out completely, and we make sure that we have the same APIs, the same interface, and the same features across the board for all the different brands, but also for all the different versions. And of course, it's a work in progress. There are continuously new devices coming out or becoming more popular. But that's basically the approach that we take. We have a few things that we try to live by. One of them is, of course, making it as easy as possible for our customers. So we actually don't want them to worry about, oh my God, which version of software is running on this TV? Was it bought in 2016, or was it bought in 2013 or before? So we try to shield our customers from that complexity and just provide a decent layer that allows them to integrate with those devices in a very easy way.